In this episode of Creative Christians, jazz artist Eric Willis joins me to talk about and play music.
I just appreciate more than ever the ability to say, all things come from thee, O Lord, and of thine own am I giving to you, even on the jazz stage or even playing a secular song, recognizing that I can achieve something, that I'm able to move people, not just play the song, but I want you, because of my experience, I want you to feel me more than even hear me.
That's musician Eric Willis, today on Creative Christians. My name is Tim Ristow. I'm a creative, a filmmaker and writer. I'm also a Christian. Many of my friends are also Christian creatives, writers, filmmakers, actors, musicians, photographers, and artists. Who are these people, and how does their faith infuse their creativity? These are stories of Creative Christians. Welcome to another episode of Creative Christians, the podcast series that explores Christian creatives, their talents, their faith, and what they're doing at the intersection of both. I'm your host, Tim Ristow. Thank you so much for listening once again. Today, I'm coming to you from the Edge Church in Azle, Texas, near Fort Worth. And a special shout out again to Pastor Steve Sanfort and all the great members here at the Edge for allowing Creative Christians to move in for a few days to record some episodes here in the wonderful Dallas-Fort Worth area. Today's guest is significant on a number of levels. He is the first musician to guest on Creative Christians, and he is a jazz musician. My guest today is the incredibly talented Eric Willis. And this interview is loaded with lots of powerful material. Eric's story is tied intimately into music and family. Eric Willis is a pianist and keyboard artist out of Dallas, Texas. He has also been a percussionist. He has a long list of successful performances and tours with artists like Kirk Whalum, Wayman Tisdale, Tom Braxton, Melba Moore, Angela Bofill, Fingerprints Band, and many more. He is currently working with platinum-level producer Erick J. Morgan. I'm very excited and pleased to be able to welcome Eric Willis to Creative Christians. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate being here.
Let's start at the beginning. Where were you born?
Yes, I'm from Houma, Louisiana, little town below New Orleans.
Yeah.
And the only time we are famous is when hurricanes hit us first on their way to New Orleans. So we get something like an honorable mention.
How long did you live there?
I left Houma when I was 18 for college. I went to Southern University in Baton Rouge.
Okay.
Studied there 2 years, and then I went on to the Army Band in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. So I went into the service.
Right. What was life like for you growing up in Louisiana area?
Well, it's a very small town, so a little bit slower. I think it was a major celebration to get a McDonald's in that town. I remember the day they opened. So
yeah,
I loved music, so I was banging around on stuff. Music was really a saving grace, if you will.
Did you have certain artists, bands that you were listening to back then that inspired you right from the beginning?
Yeah, I remember having a little record player. Little manual thing, probably had one speaker in it.
Yeah.
And the first record I learned to put that needle down without scratching was I heard it through the grapevine. That was Gladys Knight's version, by the way. The next one was the Beatles, Let It Be.
Yes.
And I thought, since we were in this Catholic area, I thought Let It Be was about Mother Mary, a Catholic. I thought it was a Catholic song. Most of my life, I thought that was a Catholic song. I loved it. One of my favorite songs.
What did your parents do, and what kind of role models were they? Did they help inspire your music interests, or what was that life like for you at home?
Yeah, so my mother was a pianist. She played at the church, but her career was, she was an English teacher. So she taught literature and speech and drama.
Yeah.
Then my father was a band director.
I see. Yeah. Okay, now that piece of the music puzzle pops right into place.
Yeah, you see the convergence there.
Yeah.
He was a bit of an enigma because he's a like a very harsh man. We didn't have dysfunctional in our vocabulary back then.
Gotcha.
So I called him abrasive. Never understood why he was so abrasive, but he was just a mean guy towards us, kind towards people in the community. Yeah. So it was very strange. I used to practice music to get away from my dad.
Ah, okay. Well, there's another piece of the puzzle then. Mm-hmm. It became a kind of relief or a little salvation for you to get away and do that.
Yeah, it was a lot of things. It was a crutch. It was salvation. It was busy work.
Right. Was faith an integral part of life for you at that point in time? Does it come in earlier, or was that something that came in later in life?
Yeah, it was always a part. As long as I could remember, my mother played for the choir.
Yeah.
And so I could see myself sitting on the piano with her. I can remember just being at all the rehearsals.
Yeah.
And maybe 4 or 5 years old, I began to recognize that a particular note she would play, I would wait on that note and just smack it when she was going to hit it. And so she was getting her note and mine an octave higher.
So what did you start playing, first of all? What kind of instrument, and I know you said you were banging around on stuff. Were you interested in drums, or did the keyboard kind of prove itself right away as something that you were intrigued by?
Yeah, that's a picture of me with a snare drum, a marching snare drum. I was about 3 years old.
Yeah.
But my mother took me to a concert. It was I think it was a Jackson Southern Air, so guitar quartet kind of gospel group,
right,
out of Mississippi, I think. And they played a song. Those kinds of groups, they would tell stories, and the story would last 10 minutes before they would even begin to sing, And so the guy's vamping on this thing. I didn't know the word vamp at the time, but he played 4 notes in his vamp on the bass.
Yeah.
The next day, I played that on the organ in the house, and I called my mother. I was so excited, and she knew exactly where I'd gotten it from. And next thing you know, they called a colleague, Howard Nixon, and I started taking piano lessons from Howard Nixon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
At what point did you go into the U.S. Army? How old were you then?
So 22 years old, I think. I was 22.
Okay. And so how much time between when you start playing that organ to going into the Army?
So organ is 5 years old.
5 years old.
I take piano lessons. By age 17, I won the Tourget de Beau classical piano competition. That was a national competition. It was Tourget de Beau was one of the first African-American classical pianists to tour, so which was very difficult for people of color at the time. So he was a virtuoso pianist.
Wow.
And I won that Tourget de Beau in 1981. I graduated high school in 82, do a couple of years. And then I milled around. I was kind of lost for a couple of years, just not understanding what my challenge was.
Yeah.
And that was a major challenge. I think it'll be some years before I know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
But when I got to college, I noticed that all the other men, the guys they had confidence, personality, they were gregarious, and I was withdrawn, and I couldn't figure out why. And it was going to be 20 more years before I actually figured out what it was.
Figuring that out.
Yeah.
Well, then those early musical, both the people that inspired you and you making strides in music, from organ to winning that competition, what did those things do for you, for your musical interest and for your confidence?
Well, I mean, music was my identity. My father strategically put us in a town where we had no relatives. So that was him pulling us away from anybody.
That was intentional on his part.
Yes, indeed. And again, it took years to figure out that he was intentional in all of this.
Right.
There's a great book called The Lies We Believe. Dr. Chris Thurman, he lived in Austin when I had that book. Yeah. I've had it for maybe 20 years. And he says one of the lies, he says your mind is like a tape recorder.
Yeah.
You can tell when it was written. And I say a double cassette because he says if you record as many lies as truths, you're the most unstable person of them all. The person that believes more lies is stable, not healthy, but still more stable than the person who believes an equal amount of lies and truths. I was that guy in the middle. And of course, the person who has truth is very stable and very healthy.
Yeah.
So I was the guy in the middle, very unstable. But one of the lines in his book is, you are what you do. And music, I identified. I didn't have any other personality, any other characters. So music was everything. Yeah. And I realized I was hardly anything when I wasn't doing it.
So that gave you a route, that gave you an identity, and that gave you something to invest in at that point in your life. When you went into the Army and then started to play for the band there, tell me how that came about and what you played and kind of some of the music you did there, performed there.
You have to go through all the auditions and all of those kinds of things to get into the band.
Yeah.
But when I was recruited, they were not taking any more musicians. I should have just waited, should have walked away and said, I'll wait.
Right.
Come get me when you want me. But I just, that recruiter, he's just trying to get you in. He doesn't really care. So, so I signed the document. And to become a radio operator, I thought, well, electronics is close, something, something digital or whatever it might be.
Right.
I ended up installing radios and intercoms in tanks.
Oh, my gosh.
And I got out in that field and realized how grueling that is, especially when it rains and it gets sloppy and slushy.
Right.
I went and auditioned for the band immediately, and they took me on what they call OJT, on-the-job training. Mm-hmm. Well, I went in there and aced that audition. And next thing I know, I'm in the band as a percussionist because I played drums all throughout high school.
Okay.
And then all of the combos they have, you would play Dixieland and gospel music and blues. And if they said you were rock or you're in the country band, they would put you in any of these combos.
Right.
And so I ended up playing piano and percussion and all kinds of things. And thank God, taxpayers, your dollars afford us some of the best instruments possible. So you gave me a beautiful platform in which to grow.
And that was really your first exposure to that many kind of instruments, would you say?
No, I could hang out in my dad's band hall and just go through the instruments. Or he would have some at home to teach people. And I've touched everything over a lifetime.
Yeah.
I also went to Grambling's band camp in the summer.
Okay.
And they have a big old band cage, and I would hang out when everybody else was playing around. I would be around those instruments. I was really fascinated with how instruments worked.
What drew you the most to the keyboards then? Why did you kind of end up leaning that way more and more as time went on?
Because in concert band, I had a penchant for piano, of course, and was always fascinated by what makes these chords happen. For instance, when you're practicing piano, when you're playing classical pedagogy, you're playing the great composers, but you're listening to the Eagles and Chicago on the radio, and I'm fascinated with how are they doing, the songs that they're doing, and how is that chord moving? And so I was fascinated in pursuing piano in that way.
Yeah,
I think that's the part that really I was crazy about, but I loved all the instruments. I just percussion and piano rose to the top.
I'm talking with musician Eric Willis. You're listening to Freddie the Freeloader from Eric Willis' album Father to Son, produced by his son, Josh Willis. Early inspirations for you. You talked about winning that competition. Was that an inspiration for you as a young black man to see other musicians, in a competition also that had that kind of name recognition for it?
Yeah, because that's the first time I got to see other pianists of quality coming from all over the country.
Right.
And it gave me a start, really, because I'm afraid. I'm a timid kid at the time.
Right.
So As a matter of fact, when I finished my second piece, the judges on the panel got up and they came around the piano and they asked me to play again, and it just scared me to death. But I played the piece again. It was a Schumann piece.
Yeah.
And they were just looking up and down and trying to look under my hand. And they were looking for the clicking sound. What happened, I was playing with my thumb turned so far that it was hitting my fingernail. And it was like, what is that sound? And I walked out of there going, I've blown it.
Right.
And come to find out, I won the competition.
That's phenomenal.
They talked about, there was something that I had, they talked about was my touch. They liked my touch. It took me years to understand what it was, how different it might have been. And I think it had something to do with playing drums as a percussion instrument.
Yeah.
And then to be able to touch the piano, playing the different kinds of accents that you would play, bringing the drum accents to the piano. I think that has a lot to do with it.
And that just was something that was naturally the way you played, huh?
Right.
Oh, wow, that's phenomenal. Why jazz? What was it about jazz that really drew you to it?
That bridges your last question.
Yeah.
Classical, the confidence I walked out with.
Mm-hmm.
I also realized how much work that required.
Yeah.
Because I spent 3 to 6 hours a day preparing for that for 2 pieces.
Yeah.
And I left that experience going, I don't think I want to work that hard for the rest of my career.
Yeah.
Not realizing jazz requires the same intensity. It's going to be a different kind of discipline. But I graduated high school the same year that a friend of mine graduated college, and he had finished a degree in jazz.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know anything about jazz. I know I liked the way it sounded, but I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And he came over. He's a percussionist. I had a set of vibraphones at the house, and he waylaid those things. And I was going, man, what are you doing? What?
Yeah.
I changed from classical piano major to jazz. And I went in as a percussionist because I had facilities. I had the faculties to be able to play. Still didn't know anything.
Yeah.
But I went in, and Alvin Batiste, world-renowned musician and an incredible teacher. He would produce some great musicians. Matter of fact, he was producing musicians so fast that they weren't graduating, and he came under fire for not graduating his students. And they wrote a petition letter and put their salaries next to it. Bradford Marsalis was one of his students.
Oh,
you
my
could see him putting, $2 million by his name. There were guys playing in the Gap Band at the time, Cameo, playing in the NBC Orchestra. I mean, just, guys just putting, here's how many Grammys I have. And he produced more award-winning musicians per capita for our little school. Yeah. And he was able to maintain his job.
That says a lot right there. Was he one of your first mentors, really?
Yeah, between Howard Nixon, that classical pianist, and Alvin Batiste, they shaped my life completely, shaped what I was doing in music. I loved Quincy Jones and the music he was producing. As a songwriter, Lionel Richie was probably the premier person for me. Yeah. The way he constructs songs and the storyline is just, unbeatable. A little later in life, I think some of the best songwriters are country writers. Because again, storyline. They advance the story. Yeah. Whereas the other genres don't advance story as well as...
That's an interesting perspective. I never thought of it that way before. Yeah. How did you move from then playing music to writing music?
I think that happened in church around 12, 13 years old. We would play Amazing Grace and Miss Patterson on the organ. She was so generous. She would let me lead the songs, and I'd come up with arrangements that she had never heard before. Nobody in the church knew what I was doing. I don't know how I got away with that so many years. But I didn't realize I was arranging, creating my own, because I was bored with the rhythms and the pace of many of the songs. Right. And so I was just rearranging, didn't know that I was songwriting at the time. Oh, wow. And then I got maybe 15 or 16, got into girls. And learned how to tell that love story in a song. Or the breakups. Oh, I took them so hard. And I would write these beautiful songs my estimation of beautiful.
So you were writing from your own experiences too.
Yeah.
So, which again is that the best storytellers start there.
So I have a myriad of ways. I remember those early ways were just emotional feelings, circumstances.
Yeah.
And now I have processes where I'll just write a beat, produce it, make it loop, play something until I hear a hook, and then write the hook. And go, okay, what is this hook about? And then write a whole song around it.
Yeah.
There are times when I'm just driving down the road and one will drop out of the sky, and and you have to get a memo recorder and grab it right away, or stop and engage that thing. So sometimes it comes like it was dictation, like it didn't even come from you, kind of thing. So it's been a myriad of ways.
Yeah.
I also realize that when I buy a new keyboard, the new sounds inspire new ways of writing, new ways of creating.
Interesting. The instrument affects the writing process. Okay, Eric, we're here at the piano. You going to play a little something for us?
Yeah. One, I learned how to practice by taking elements and trying to duplicate those elements in different places. So very same line. So that's one line. What you're doing is trying to duplicate that exact line all over the instrument. And when you do that, you know this piano like inside out. And what happens, you're able to put your hands on things.
Beautiful. What's the writing process like for you when you sit down in front of the piano to write music?
Yeah, so my process has changed over time. Now I compose for colors or moods. So if you told me it was dark and passionate or feeling, it might sound like this. COVID has changed a whole lot for me.
Oh, yeah.
As I realize I've not composed a lot of music since, but there's a lot of change, a lot of paradigm shift has taken place and helped me with perspective. But I don't know that I've written 3 songs since, being stuck at home. I did buy an EWI, electronic wind instrument. I think that's right.
Oh, interesting.
And it's like an electronic saxophone. And then I went and bought the universal saxophone book. So this is the one that you start from scratch, and it's about 300 pages.
Yeah.
And I started playing that thing and reading. And for the last 2 years, I've been playing, and I'm at the point where I can play and record on it.
Oh, cool.
Not a great saxophonist yet.
Tell me about some of the people you've toured with and had the opportunity to play alongside and with, and them to play with you. Some of those people that have had an influence on you and have just been a joy to be able to perform with.
I think the first big artist was Angela Bofill. What happened in the 80s, you had a lot of, I call them the lady crooners. So you had Stephanie Mills, Angela Bofill, Melba Moore, Mickey Howard, all of these ladies that would tour the country. What happens, the record labels started cutting the budgets.
Wow.
And so they would have to hire well-trained, well-prepared musicians.
Right.
So they would hire a music director for a certain part of the country. They could cut the cost and get a guy like me. I would pick my rhythm section, and when they showed up, count it off, and we were ready to play. And we would take on Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, or whatever those 4 or 5 states might have been.
Right.
But we would take over a portion of the tour, so they could count on 5 or 6 guys around the country.
Yeah.
I was very, very fortunate to be one of those guys.
Oh, that's awesome.
So Angela Bofill contacts me. We show up. I'm still very, very scary. I'm timid just ridiculously a scary person.
Yeah.
So she came in. She's coming in from Washington, D.C., so she's hardcore. I was stiff as a board. When she walked on stage, I couldn't be any more scared. And she threw a fake punch at me and expected me to jump, and I didn't because I couldn't be more afraid. And I think it scared her that maybe I was harder than she expected. And so she just said, she called a song, and I had 3 keyboards. I had pedals. I had volume pedals and sustain. And I played a string line and swelled it in. I played the flute line while the string was being held, and I played the piano. And she heard all of this music coming out of that one guy. And before that song was over, she was laying on the piano singing to me.
Oh, my gosh.
It was beautiful.
Now, that is a moment you will never forget. Wow.
Yeah, because I know she had the impression, I don't know how this is going to go. And you're walking into this new band, you've never heard them and seen them before.
Right.
And your name is on the marquee. Yeah. You've got to show up, So anyway, that was a beautiful thing. And what happens, those ladies started talking to each other. So Stephanie Mills comes, and they asked for that guy. And there I am playing with Stephanie. And same thing, Melba Moore, she did Color Purple. And the thing with Michael Jackson, I'm drawing a blank. Ease on down the road.
Oh, The Wiz, the musical version of Wizard of Oz.
Yes. So I'm playing with her. I'm prepared to play her R&B stuff, the chord stuff. She came in with like a New York Broadway book, notes everywhere.
Wow.
And we did the things, the Gut Bucket Blues from Pearly. And I'm playing, I'm just sweet and quaint. And she says, no, baby, this is Gut Bucket. And she's like, this has got to be. And when she finished explaining it, I was brazen on the instrument. Never played a piano like that with just that kind of gusto.
Yeah.
And she brought that out of me. And I learned that there are people that don't play, but they understand music so well that I call them better musicians than I, because they understand what it's supposed to sound like and feel like. I worked with an actor named Oba Babatunde. He was in the movie Life and some other things. He danced with Liza Minnelli. He's a triple threat.
Yeah.
I did a Louis Armstrong show with him. Yeah. And the same thing. He showed me how there was a moment in the presentation where Louis was having a meltdown because Dizzy and Miles Davis, these young guys in their 20s, are mocking him. As if they don't know what he went through to get to where he was. And on stage, the actor is portraying this meltdown, and he has got me. He didn't tell me what to do. He just told me what it needed to feel like. Yeah. The betrayal and the hurt and the pain. And before it was over, I'm playing the piano with my forearms. I'm reaching in and grabbing the strings. And at the end of that scene, everybody was gripped. and couldn't believe what had taken place, including me. I couldn't believe what had taken place. So those moments helped me understand the dynamic, the passion that we can place in our music, not just play it and sing it because it's beautiful, but if it's painful, somebody should feel it.
For you, then, is that live performance really what music is all about? Did that start, I guess what I'm asking is, did that really start an avenue for you where being live and on stage puts you more in touch with that musicality of yourself than perhaps a record,
Yeah, recording comes off to me as more sterile.
Yeah.
Because you want to be perfect. That's what the Pro Tools and all of the,
right. Multiple takes.
Oh, my gosh, and fixing notes and doing all of those things. Well, you want to be perfect, and so as a result, you just keep trying to almost sterilize the music. What's brilliant about the producers today, it's perfect, but the creativity that they bring to music today, and much of it has to do with silence. Because the music is more repetitious, and so in order to break the monotony, they started putting mute. And you can automate the mute button now and do some of the most creative things with pulling things out or adding simple things, antiphonally. So they are still brilliant, but a different kind of realm, that we work in, a different area, different thought process. Yeah. But live for me is everything, There's some things that I know I'm going to play exactly the same way each time or attempt to. Yeah. But there's a moment where I call it 3 levels of mutation. I want to play it like the record, level 1. I want to increase the intensity, level 2. And level 3, I want you to know how I feel about the record. So level 3, I'm trying to get to the 3rd level of mutation. Yeah. On a recording, we may not be able to get there. Yeah. Most of the second levels, if you look at YouTube videos now, the 2nd level of mutation was when somebody went off on the fade. That's not even going to make the actual recording. And there's some brilliant things that happen that we're never going to hear. Or they'll have outtakes and we finally get to hear it.
Right. Oh, that's, hearing you talk about these different levels, I got to say, reminds me a little bit of Coltrane as he progressed through and was always looking for almost that spiritual level. Well, and I know he discovered that spiritual level of playing and of crafting music. I know he did, of course, a lot of writing and self-searching and writing and getting to that point, but also just how spiritual his playing was on a live level too. And I don't know, you remind me a little bit about that, the way you're talking about achieving that and connecting with that level of yourself and playing with others too in a communal kind of experience.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because Coltrane, he knew what to practice. As a matter of fact, he'd be playing a live gig, and on the break, he'd go back in the kitchen and start practicing, but he knew what he was aiming for. And I think that's one of the challenges, especially being young. We don't know what we're supposed to practice. What are we working on? And I finally figured it out to the extent that, one, you're challenging yourself to do the things that you've not done before. You're learning patiently to bring something new into the realm. I call it holes in my bucket. I'm trying to plug some holes. Right. But so I understand how to do that and what the next level of engagement is. And that's something that, man, if we had the conversation with Coltrane and the guys of his era, they could have clued us in on that because they were looking at classical music. Many of us are not. I called my old professor, Howard Nixon, and asked him, could we work on a book of etudes together? And those are studies around a particular idea. Right. And so we started working those things out, and we're doing it online. So we're writing a book together online. This is one of my favorites. This, I think, is etude number 6. It's a 40-page book. And what it's designed to do is for people who don't play classical, who don't read, if you never saw a Rachmaninoff trill, 4-finger, it's 4 fingers on 3 notes. If you didn't know that, you would play that with 3 fingers, and you suffer what we call muscle failure. You keep doing that, and those muscles they just give out on you. So a forefinger is 4, 3, 2, 1, and your thumb is tucked under. So we write a whole exercise on that. Write a whole piece, and that we expose you to Rachmaninoff. And so here's one where you might hear Bach might do something. There's a second movement that sounds like this. Another Mozart might have sounded like this. So we want to expose people who would not otherwise know classical music or know how these motions are happening, to add that to your style of playing.
How much of faith influences your writing in music and playing of music?
There's a thing people are calling now, they call it flow. To get in, like Wayman Tisdale, basketball player, he talked about being in the zone when you shoot and everything is falling, you're in the zone.
Right.
And for us, we see it as a realm that we achieve in worship. And so interchangeably, the way that people are describing flow now is to get to a place where it feels almost as if you're watching yourself do what you do.
Yeah.
And to get to that place almost of, somebody might say, mindlessness, we have to break apathy and boredom to get to a place where we're being challenged. And then the challenge, we overcome the challenge of the thing that we're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes to that place where you can do it without thinking about it. And that's flow. I feel very fortunate to have a Christian faith, a walk with God, even to be respectful of those who have different worldviews and paradigms, and to know that they arrive at, if there is a thing called flow for them, that they may arrive at it in a different way.
Yeah.
But I just appreciate more than ever the ability to say, all things come from thee, O Lord, and of thine own am I giving to you, even on the jazz stage or even playing a secular song, recognizing that I can achieve something, that I'm able to move people, not just play the song, but I want you, because of my experience, I want you to feel me more than even hear me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that. When did that faith aspect start to enter your life? Because I know today that's a big part of your life, but how did you get from, the 21-year-old Army boy to the minister of music today and minister in general?
Yeah, so I played my first church. I was 12 years old. I probably wasn't that good, but I remember my mom waking me up or driving me.
Yeah.
I probably was really engaged and eager to play, so she didn't have to worry about getting me up, but to drive me across town to this little church at 7 a.m. And played that. Great pastor, and he was also a teacher. He taught history, And so always able to engage me at a level that I was a student that he knew, and also as a pastor. My mother modeled the Christian faith for me, and she was the first lady that they allowed to teach in the seminary. So she taught a New Testament survey, and she taught English. So I had that, and I also had the impression, thank God, that my father was a godly man. I had that impression growing up. Mm-hmm. And so I modeled what I thought those values were. Yeah. There was something broken in my home. I could not tell what it was. It was very difficult. I mean, it takes an intelligent, astute person to understand the dynamics. So this is the first time I'm saying this. I feel very fortunate that I did not know truly what my dad turned out to be. I can't wait to get to that part.
Let's talk about that. How did that revelation come to you? And, about how old were you when you started to discover your dad was not who you thought he was? Mm-hmm. And what process did that start to you, which I know will probably lead into this book?
Okay. So when I make my presentation, like I did one just recently, if you'll allow me.
Absolutely.
I talk about being in the Army band and sending resumes around the country. I'd never heard of the Bible Belt. I didn't know Texas in this region was the Bible Belt. Yeah. So I sent resumes to New York, L.A., Seattle, Atlanta, and Dallas. And I didn't know why Dallas was responding so well. It was just robust responses. So I moved to Dallas, accepted a job at a church called Concord. This pastor, great pastor, every 2 weeks, he was blessing new ministers and sending them all over the country to plant churches or to take a role on a staff or be called to lead. And so I caught the church planting bug at that church. I went out to South Dallas, grueling work. I did work, but running on empty, I joined another church. Mm-hmm. And after about a year and a half, I joined that church, and they talked me into taking a staff role. And so I became a minister of music.
Yeah.
Sacred music was what I wanted to do when I moved to Dallas. My secondary goal was to play secular music, but in professional environments.
Right.
So I'm going through that. I get called from that church. I go out and plant for the Southern Baptist Convention. Mm-hmm. So now I am in the presence of Lyle Schaller, Rick Warren. I'm learning all of these people who are planting churches and growing them and doing all these exceptional things. I'm learning by leaps and bounds. Problem is, I'm in the church with a toxic leader who is self-absorbed, and he runs that thing in the ground. I left before the ship went down, but I was deeply wounded, angry with God and man, didn't want anything to do with his people.
Right.
So I started working in a hotel downtown, paid me about $4,000 a month to play piano in the lobby, and that's what I did. Wow. A friend of mine called and asked me if I would play for Highland Park. They had a Bible study on a Tuesday night, and it was a massive band on stage and the tech team, and I say $500,000 worth of lights overhead. Yeah. It was a fascinating presentation. Problem was there were only 15 to 20 people in the Bible study, so a lot of resources being wasted.
Right.
And I went to the leader and I said, "What are you trying to accomplish? I'd like to help you, but I don't know what you're trying to accomplish." And he stuttered. He didn't have an idea. So I went to a DTS bookstore, got him a book called Values Driven Ministry. And I brought it to him and I said, "Man, if you write down your vision and your mission, how you want to execute this, all of these people have master's degrees. They will run like racehorses."
Yeah.
And so next thing you know, hurt my friend because I dismantled that program.
Right.
Where all the money was being lost. They paid me as a consultant.
Yeah.
And they realized, wow, we're paying this guy enough. Why don't we just ask him to come on staff? And so I did. I came on staff at Highland Park Methodist, right at the foot of SMU campus. And I helped in 7 years formulate this program. And I'm on a team. but doing this. But by the time I left after 7 years, they had built a $54 million facility to house the worship service that I helped them to create.
Wow.
Again, I didn't do the work. I was a part of the team and just really asking the tough questions to make things go in a particular direction.
Right.
I'll say it like that. And then I designed their music program. So recorded 2 records for them and, arranged and composed. And that's all hymns. And I mean, just beautiful take on hymns. So all of that I was torturing Miss Patterson with growing up came handy. It really did. It came in handy. And around the corner, Park Cities Baptist Church heard that there's some black guy around the corner doing these great things. And they hired me to play and help them with their Saturday night service.
Wow.
So that 7-year span, about 6 years of that 7, work with them, they spent $32 million on their new facility.
Wow.
Then it went to Sunday morning. I'd worked myself out of a job because I couldn't be in 2 places at once.
Right.
Then Gene Getz Church, Fellowship Bible Church North, was replanting to a new location. They hired me to come on and do the same thing, develop the music program, the worship, and all of those things. So I can see my mother's life radiating through the work that I was doing.
Yeah.
And all of these, just being in church, music was drawing me to it, but I was hearing the word and took faith very seriously.
Yeah.
Is before I hit a place where I realized, wait a minute, there's a lot of people who are not as serious about this. I took them for serious, and it made me very, very serious about it.
Yeah.
And, you slip a little when you look around and go, wait a minute, I really respected those guys, and they've fallen a bit.
Yeah.
And that's just a part of getting better theology. You recognize we're all sinful and broken.
Right.
And now you know how we approach God. You have a healthier perspective about it. But I hope I'm helping you see how I was being used and being able to contribute.
Yes.
But based on what God was doing in my life with the creativity, the worship, and the word, understanding those things and coming through to these places. So after Gene Getz is where I hit the brick wall. Right at the end of my tenure there, my mother dies. She died in 2010, and she was my father's covering, and he became uncovered. She had 72 hours to live, and he was calling me. I had 3 services a weekend, and it's just not easy to replace me, so I was going to play the Friday night service, get somebody to play the Sunday services for me, but he called me on Thursday and said she had 72 hours to live. And now I'm just frantic and hurting, want to be there. My heart's in 2 different places.
Right.
And so I rush over Saturday morning as fast as I could over in North Louisiana at the time. Yeah. And all I can offer her is my presence. So I just sit at her bedside and I sing songs to her and I thank her for all she's done for me. And my dad comes in occasionally and touches her feet. He's been a surgeon or something, and he's gauging how much life is in her by her body temperature. He lured me over there because he had a banquet to play for on his trumpet and wanted me to accompany him. So when he asked me, I'm a compliant child. I'm still a quiet child. I'm 45, 46 years old at the time, and I'm still compliant and quiet and timid. And so I look at him bewildered. And he realizes, okay, that's not going over so well. So plan B is, you can follow me in your car, play the one song, and then come home. So I say, well, that's more reasonable of the 2 unreasonable options. Right. So I do that. I follow that guy down these country roads. He's driving 70 miles an hour. Curves. I don't know where we're going, but I'm doing the best I can to keep up. He hits a stop sign. I can see whether he went left or right. That's the best I can do. We did that. We get out to I-20. He trades 70 for 90 and blows over heels. And I'm thinking, I didn't come over here for a ticket. This is the first time I hear my voice because I'm saying it out loud. Yeah. And he brought it out of me that day. And I felt like he was going to show me something. If you're willing to leave your wife on her deathbed, I felt like I was going to see something that I'd never seen before, that I really needed to see. And the guy, he left me on the highway. So anyway, he doesn't even have enough decency to have his phone on him. So he has to drive all the way to his location. I call, or he catches me. I don't know how we're talking. I guess I'm talking from my cell phone. I'm fuzzy.
That's all right.
So he gives me 2 turns. I need 3. This is how little because I'm realizing as I'm looking through my windshield going, it was like it was a movie screen. Yeah. And I'm watching him pull away, and I'm concluding he never cared for my mother. He doesn't care for me right now. Right. And I'm recognizing that was the day I learned my dad's a narcissist. That was the day. And from that moment, he has never failed me in my understanding of narcissism. So subsequently, he tried to swindle me out of my inheritance, put us in court for 7 years. Oh. I got the voice I never had. I have the posture I never had, the backbone, the tenacity I didn't know that I had. That guy is afraid of me today. And I'm thankful that, that fear keeps distance between us, Yeah. It took a long time to get over.
Yeah.
That was 10 years, it's 12 years ago now, and I'm finally whole. But the wholeness came from 4 years ago. I started working with Andy Whaley. Yeah. He was pastoring Art Church. It's Lutheran, Missouri Synod.
Yeah.
And I heard that guy preach. And I've been in church all my life, and I have never heard the gospel presented in this way. And it was life-changing. And from that moment, I began to recognize not that the people that I have worshiped with were missing. It was just that there's a kind of clarity and an approach that personally I needed. And I hear that coming from this presentation and view of the gospel.
What was so different about that from how you'd heard it before?
The law-gospel dynamic is probably the biggest thing that I understand. The Old Testament is laws. This is what we were supposed to do. We realized we couldn't measure up, but it was to show us our inability to do so. The Jewish or the Hebrew people, that nation was supposed to represent God to us, to the rest of the world, so that we see. And when they failed, Israel failed, God says, I'm going to raise up a new Israel. He's speaking of Jesus. And the new Israel is revealed in the New Testament. And now it's not what we do, it's what he did for us. And his response, what is our response to what he did for us? A man walks up to him and says, hey, of all those laws back there that I tried to live up to, what's the greatest? And he recites the Shema in his way. Love the Lord your God. And then he says, love your neighbor. I have never been to a church that preached, first of all, love your neighbor as a response to what Jesus has done. So I've been in churches where the response is clap your hands, sing a little louder, shout, run a few more laps, do this, be here, go there as a response. And what we've done primarily, in my estimation, is we have created new laws in the New Testament where we are under grace. Just on the way over, I had a conversation with a friend, and he was saying that there's another friend that wants to leave the church, but he has some wayward thoughts. His new paradigm he's developing is flawed. And I say, well, one of the first things you can do is pray for him. Well, I don't know that I can pray for him because he doesn't have the faith. And I go, wait a minute. Again, you see the dynamic. I said, you're creating a new law. Tell me this new law that you created. Because the effectual fervent prayers of the righteous availeth much. And if that is true, where do you get your righteousness from? From yourself? No, it's imputed to you as righteousness. Why? Because you're sinful and broken. So your prayers are effectual and fervent because you're righteous, because God made you so. Why? Because of what Jesus did. And what's your response to it? Love your neighbor.
Love your neighbor, yeah. You bring out some fantastic points there. We could go off on any one of those in depth. But what really strikes me the most is it's there is like a new Pharisees today. And I hate to say it, but there are, leaders in the church and some church bodies and Christian church in general that I think are contributing to that. And I don't mean that across the board, but there clearly are the new Pharisees rising. And maybe it's that stringent hold to, as you said, creating new rules when Christ is here to say, I'm freeing you up, look to me, not to yourselves.
Yes. I believe Paul explained the grace that we have so well that he had to go back and say, now, what you do with this grace, by all means, don't continue in sin.
Yeah. Right.
It's like, God forbid.
Yeah.
But he was saying, he was trying to get us to understand how much freedom we actually have.
Yeah.
And so the condition of the world, I believe that many of the leaders are responsible. The Christian faith is responsible for much of the chaos that's happening right now. It was our contribution to the chaos. I think we've had the greatest contribution.
Yeah, right.
And now people are pulling weapons because you didn't put bacon on my cheeseburger.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that we've had a major contribution to that.
Yeah.
All of those who never stay together, making it through any kind of weather. All of those who love will stay together for love, together for life.
You're listening to Those Who Love from Eric Willis' album Father to Son, produced by his son, Josh Willis. Let's bring this to your book. You have two sons, correct?
That's right.
This book is by Eric Willis called Father to Son, Words of Wisdom Every Son Should Consider. It's a thin little volume, but I get the sense already, having just flipped through it a little bit, that it is just loaded with stuff. Eric, tell me what this book is about, why you felt compelled to write it, and how much of this is a result of what you experienced with your father and then what you've also experienced now with two sons of your own.
I realized, looking back, I don't have a legacy to offer my sons. One, as African American, you don't hardly know where you came from.
Yeah.
And so the best thing that you could have is identity from your father. Well, I don't have one. And now knowing what he truly is, I could say I'm thankful that I don't have his identity.
Yeah.
But I got very concerned as to what I get to hand my sons off. What do I give them? And so I was sitting in church, and I would jot down, when in spare moments, I would just start writing little notes about community service or civil servitude or finance or love or being a father or a husband. And I realized I was writing in the little black journal, I was putting the little tabs over the top with the topics. Mm-hmm. And then I'd write down, if I had another idea, I might create a new tab. Well, it turned out to be 52 topics, not necessarily planned, but I thought, especially when the youngest, Josh, it's James, the oldest, and Josh, when he graduated high school, I was going to hand him that black journal. Mm-hmm. And I did. And those two boys started reading the thing and said, Dad, you got to publish this. So that's what drove that book. I was also compelled, while I was going through with my dad, he thought he could beat me because he had money. He had resources.
Yeah.
And one morning I was in the recording studio before I went to church, and I just said, Lord, I need a breakthrough. And what happened, I was looking for a place to recover from toxic relationships.
Yeah.
And I was up all till 4 a.m, looking for that place and couldn't find it. You know, it was all drugs, alcohol, those kinds of recovery programs everywhere, but there was nothing regarding toxic relationships. Yeah. So I gave up. The last question I asked myself is, who would know? If that place exists, who would know? And I just said, Dr. Phil. So I write 2 paragraphs. I say, Dr. Phil, I'm looking for this place. And then I write a paragraph, this is why. My dad did blah, blah, and done. I was expecting to get an email saying, oh, yeah, that place is in Minnesota. Here's the number. They were calling my phone. They returned the email. They wanted us on the TV show. Mm-hmm. They returned the email. I didn't see it. They started calling my phone. I didn't recognize it. So, I don't owe you money, so I don't answer the phone. I finally did answer the phone, and the lady said, I'm calling from the Dr. Phil show, and we want you and your father on that show this coming Monday. Can you travel? And I said, I can. I said, but you're going to have some bodyguards like those other shows, because I'm not sure I won't try to waylay this guy. Right. So they did call him, and he refused to be on the show. And I said, man, somebody who wants their 15 minutes of fame always wanted it. I said, why wouldn't he show up and embarrass me on national TV? When he did that, I realized he knows he's wrong. He's not going to admit it, but it showed. So that morning I asked for a breakthrough. I went to my phone and I got the message from the producer. She said, this is such and such from the Dr. Phil television show. And she said a few other things. Mm-hmm. I don't know what caused me to do it, but I hit the record button, put that phone up to the microphone and recorded that. Yeah. That was the introduction to the book called Turn on the Light, Exposing Abuse Without Confronting Your Abuser. And I realized you can't confront them because they're not going to have a reasonable conversation. Yeah. So I'm just going to bring light to my situation. If I can't be what I was trying to be in life, I'm going to tell everybody why.
Hi, this message is for Eric. My name is and I'm calling from the Dr. Phil television show, and I'm calling in regards to a letter that you sent to us, and I wanted to speak with you more about it. I also want to let you know that I sent you an email last night. It has some questions. If you can just answer them and get that back to me, that would be great. My number here is 323-323-323-323. Hi, this message is for Eric. My name is and I'm calling from the Dr. Phil television show, and I'm calling in regards to a letter that you sent to us.
I had a good life, one dedicated to the service of others. I was a minister, a musician, a worship leader, a faithful husband, a proud father, and a loyal friend. I woke up one morning and realized that I had been living my life in a peculiar kind of darkness. There were hidden things that no one else could see, no one else knew about, and it was destined to stay hidden, stay in the darkness, except the effects of my challenge were beginning to take their toll on my life.
And so that book is 20 chapters. It's an audio book. It's available free on YouTube. If you type in Turn on the Light, Eric Willis, you can listen to it in order. And the thing about it is I set it to music and sound effects. So when I say I had a blow up, you hear bombs. You hear bullets whizzing past your ears. And so very engaging. That was the first of books that was connected to this situation. Yeah. And so Father the Son was the realization coming, closer to the end of that turmoil. Yeah. Is to say, I need to give my son something tangible.
You want to read a section from that maybe is a favorite of yours or that highlights what that's all about?
Yeah, so I just talked to them, like this section, it's called Intelligence. And what I'll do, you can read this book 4 ways. I'll put the first line in bold. You can just read the first idea and keep moving. Or you can read topically. Intelligence. I say to my sons, read incessantly. People will often ask you, how you know so much about a wide variety of topics? And they'll be astonished by the answer. Well, just tell them, I read. And then I go on to say, read books cover to cover, or read for content. Find the section of the book that you really want to understand and read that for full comprehension. Read the first lines of each paragraph. Great writers always make their point in the opening statement. Read backwards or retrograde. In many cases, you can learn just as effectively by starting at the last chapter and work your way backwards. This works well with method books because they rapidly show you the missing elements to your understanding. Increase your ability to communicate and interact with others by learning a foreign language. Here's another. Overcome your fear of being surrounded by people who are smarter and more successful. There's a lesson in everywhere you look, there's a lesson. Observe and learn. Celebrate the advantage you gain of being in the presence of successful people. So I want them to increase their intelligence, and so I try to say everything that came to mind about it. Manhood. If I get to be half the man that you are becoming, that will make me twice the man that I am now.
Wow. I get the sense just from hearing you read that, obviously, these are things you've experienced and are able to impart from your own personal past and experience.
Yes.
And growth, and even recent growth, I would assume, from when you wrote this.
Yeah.
And this truly is something personal you want to be able to impart to your kids.
That's right.
I think you have left them a legacy. Let me ask a question that's probably kind of the elephant in the room. Have you forgiven your father?
Yes. And with great difficulty, I might say, with great difficulty. But I do realize something extremely valuable that I would not have seen without seeing this kind of theology that I've embraced today. There's a form of forgiveness that even God withholds. And while everybody was beating me up, and I'm saying, why are you picking on the victim about forgiving? There's not one person that talked to me about forgiving that talked to the perpetrator about stop the crime,
Right.
But there's a kind of forgiveness that God actually withholds so that the transgressor might come to repentance. So in my tradition, after the sermon, they'll say the doors of the church are open. You're sitting there, a wretch undone. You should be standing and embracing Christ. But you walk away for whatever reason, fear, discouragement, whatever it is. God did not forgive you. That there's a form of forgiveness that he is withholding. The day that you come, you receive forgiveness. And so there's a portion, I think, of forgiveness that in a philosophical way, my dad doesn't get to have because he can't say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. And I go, I forgive you for that.
Right.
I mean, I forgive him in such a way. I explain it like this. It's even in the audiobook. It's like I caught a catfish. I have let you off the hook. I take the hook out of your mouth, and I see myself literally taking the hook out of the fish's mouth. Now I drop you in the water and I let you swim away. And that's what I've done with my dad. I used to be so mad. I never took him off the hook. Every time I got angry, I would yank that thing and start reeling him in again. And it was hurting me, and it was very repetitious.
Right.
But I finally took the hook out of his mouth and let him swim away. And what I needed for him to do was swim away. And he found ways to come back up my channel, and there I am reeling him in again.
Yeah.
But all of those things are over with. But it takes time.
Yeah.
And I realized I'm not going to allow people to tell me how much time it takes. I'm saying, listen, I've been abused for 40 years. If it takes me 20 years to get over 40, then it'll be 20 years. And thank you very kindly.
You're in a much more healed place today. What are some of the ministry opportunities you're involved with today, and how has that changed your life?
Amazing. I had the opportunity to become the executive director of City Lights Church Planting and Mission Network. And with that, I bring my church planting skills, music skills, And then I realized I'm doing nonprofit, so I started taking a nonprofit certification course, and to understand the dynamics of how to really run an organization effectively. But all of these things I get to use now because I know what it feels like to hurt, so I get to help hurting people. And you get to do that with a reasonable amount of understanding and compassion. That's affecting me quite a bit.
That's near and dear to your heart.
Yeah.
You've lived it. Now you get to help others who are living it. That's a beautiful ministry right there. Mm-hmm. It combines, as you just mentioned, your music, passion for music, your love for ministry, your past, your present, and that delivers your future, all through Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. I'm going to ask you this again. How is faith a part of your music?
I think it's a driving force because I'm always looking for opportunities, even in secular, probably more in secular environments than in worship environments. I'm looking to engage people and offer Christ. And the way that people respond to the way we're doing music, we're not just playing the songs, we're making people feel the music. And there's something about, changing the barometric pressure around the songs that people are deeply engaged. And then when we have the opportunity to talk, sometimes we can't be overt where we are, but we can represent Christ in such a way that they recognize there's something different about those guys. Or, I heard a little bit of church in the way you played that song.
I love that. What are some words of advice you can give for other Christian creatives who may be out there listening who can relate to your story, either as fellow musicians or hope to be musicians, Christians struggling in their faith or with their fathers? What's some advice you have for other Christian creatives?
There's so much there. That's a lot of meat on that bone.
I know there is.
Well, with family dynamics, understanding your past is the key to your future. You have to unpack everything you possibly can. And no matter how painful, you're actually maturing by facing the pain, addressing what can be addressed, or making the changes for yourself. And when you come out on the other side, everybody who can stand tall with you will be able to walk with you. Mm-hmm. Others in love, you may have to walk away from.
Yeah.
In creativity with music, there are unlimited right answers. So when you're creating, who can know what the next best answer is, the next best note, but yourself? So I'd say challenge yourself. When you've written a really good song, there's a better version of it if you will hammer through some of the spaces that you just blew past, some words and phrases that you can work harder to develop and make good great and make great brilliant. Those kinds of things. Keep honing your craft. And when you're involved in this, it's a joy to see what new things come out of it. Surprise yourself. Challenges about career. When you get stuck in the doldrums, I do something called brainstorming with the intent for innovation. And so I'll write down everything I'm doing that works. Then I have to cross that out and then write down everything you've ever done. Like most people, it's job, occupational. So I'll say, write down everything you've done to earn money. Now, after we get that list, I'll say, write down everything you're capable of. I'm talking even the zaniest things. You can juggle 3 balls while turning flips or something. Write it all down.
Right.
And people are amazed when you take what I'm capable of doing with what gifts that nobody knows I have, and you start drawing correlations between those things. And what I call is A-B proposition. And the A-B proposition is, I do this, you pay me. So a barber, that's an A-B proposition. A A recording is an A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way down to the alphabet, because you got to write the song, you got to book the studio, you got to hire the musicians, you got to get the singers, you got to practice everybody, you have to get the designer, web, all of the stuff. You have to get it all done. And
it's a lot, yeah.
And then when it comes time to that point where you get paid, you don't even know if you can sell it because of competition. Right. So even that, I did that brainstorming process when I had the revenues to do a record. And then I had a piano book called Piano Quick. Piano Quick emerged to the top because it's ABC. I've written it. I need to get a publisher, and I need a book cover designer. And there's a few little things. I need to get the barcode. Well, those are all things in my control. So ABC, the piano book comes out, and I thought I was recording a record. So when you get stuck, start doing brainstorming for the innovation that you're looking for. And you will find the most unusual A-B propositions that you didn't know you were capable of. Nice.
Good, solid advice, practical advice on some really important areas there. What kind of music are you listening to today? And, what albums just resonate with you? What artists resonate with you today?
I'm having a really good time with the Bee Gees for some reason.
Really?
Those guys, I'd never played. I listened to their music. I've never played it.
Yeah.
So How Deep Is Your Love is an amazing piece, because there are some times where the bass line would sit practically on one place, but they chose another because they knew they were going to use that second place just shortly. Mm-hmm. So rather than repeat, they chose a different note to go to, and just the way the song moves and the storyline, again, that blows me away. But I'm also playing at a restaurant, a high-end restaurant in Dallas, every Sunday night, and the chefs and the cooks and all the guys on the line, Hispanic guys. And I heard a guy singing a song in Spanish one night, and I said, "What is that song?" And they typed it in on my phone, and I learned that I can listen to a song for 2 seconds and play what I heard while listening to the next 2 seconds and play. So I'm playing whole songs. I've got about 100 songs in Spanish that I can play. And so that I'm retroing Herbie Hancock for some reason, just missing a whole wave of things that he was doing. Now with new ears, I'm able to hear the development of him from being 20 years old with his first record to the whole scope of his life. And it's fascinating to see. Yeah. So that's one of the things I like doing is anthology. Listening to everything somebody has recorded. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 days, but you feel like you know them after you've heard them that much, all of their music.
Yeah, it is a personal experience. Where can listeners go to hear some of your music?
Well, the latest thing is YouTube. There's a record called Father to Son. Just like the book, we put that record out.
Oh.
Since COVID, I've had a major paradigm shift about what I am doing. Like I have had websites. They weren't producing very much, but you had a website because everybody has to have one.
Right.
And after COVID, I just decided to begin to do things much more meaningful. I haven't had a website in 18 months and haven't lost a lot of momentum, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
So, hadn't been putting out a lot of music. I've been focusing on city lights,
right, planting
churches and doing a little bit of that.
And that takes up a lot of time.
Yes.
That's a full-time gig.
And I'm taking a course at Yale called Art and Social Action. And it's helping you understand the arts, the power of music, and what it's going to do, how necessary and vital it is to making an impact, especially in the time that we're living, how difficult. Another book makes the same case, is a book called The Fourth Turning. It says we're in this fourth cycle, and the fourth cycle is after the raveling of our society in this major crisis. And so we're in a crisis from the way this book describes it, the crisis lasts 20 years. It started in 2008.
Yeah.
So we have another.
We're still in it.
Right. And what's unique about it is they say that art and music are the two elements that are vital to bringing us out of that into this new era.
Wow.
So again, your songwriting, your storytelling, your poetry, your artworks, your work, all of your visual arts and digital arts, those are the things that society is in need of to change the way we think and act and respond. So yes, we are in chaos, but creativity, God, oh my goodness. God said, when he said, let there be light, he called things out of chaos into order.
Right.
I have some friends who are Jewish, who told me that part of creation, they still consider it in chaos. So that when God called it in order, he called things out of chaos into order. And I think that when we create, the minute you play the first note, you created chaos. You must bring it into order.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's why it's important, too, to manage the chaos, meaning don't start too many projects at one time, because each one of those, you've created chaos that you have to bring into order. And so the better you get at organizing, you can do that. But it's better to manage the chaos by bringing it to order and then start a whole new concept.
Well, we human beings are good at creating chaos, aren't we?
My garage. It's a perfect example of that.
Everybody has a junk drawer at home. Yeah, everybody's got a garage that's in a closet or something that's in disarray. But, the chaos in our lives, all the more reasons why we're pointed to Christ, to help not rely on ourselves, but to rely on him. Tell me a little bit about your family.
Well, I have a wife who's, she works in education. Mm-hmm. And wow, very cool. She works at the district level now, so she provides all of the technology tools for courtrooms in the high school, law magnets and aircraft technical things. So she spends, $50 million a year buying all of these tools and computers and things. Very interesting how they are engaging kids with technology.
And she loves that?
Yes, big time.
Oh, awesome. She's big in education.
Yes.
Big proponent for that.
Yes.
Fantastic. Yes. And your two boys?
Oldest son is 32 now. He's a chef and super creative, creates his own dishes. Never seen anything like it, but he's super cool. And then
Does
the
he ever
youngest,
cook for you?
Lately, I get it when there's an overflow. He has 4 kids.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, then he's busy too.
Yeah. On the holidays, I can always go over. I know it's going to be a lot.
Yeah.
So the youngest is just turned 26. He is a percussionist on the Father to Son record. And he is doing well. He goes to Europe. Every year, he goes to Sweden, and he plays with this international group. They practice together, and then they tour the country. Wow. And it's just been amazing to watch. Because when you think about your children being in music, the first thing is, can they make it? Yeah. You just, you hope so much for their success. Right. You pray for them, and you kind of have to worry about it a little bit.
Sure.
But just to see that he has the ability, that was the first time I said, boy, he can do this. He can make it, especially as a percussionist. You really got to get after it to keep opportunities going. And he's the kind of guy that does work it out. He really does.
What was that like playing on the Father-Son record together? What was that experience like?
It was super. It was really superb. We played at a place called the Balcony Club every Monday. And we would try out, if we had a new song or 2 songs, we would ask the audience to pick the song that would go on the record.
Right.
And so it was a lot of fun. And I got to hang with him when he was in that 18, 19-year-old place where he's starting to get his independence and go off. How many dads get to hang with their sons and still be kind of cool? Mm-hmm.
You started telling us about how music was, kind of a saving grace for you early on in life. You've now come through a lot and very strong in your faith, and you're a minister, and you're proclaiming the gospel through your music, through your work, through your life. We saw who you were at the beginning as a young Eric Willis and what music meant for you then. What does music mean for you today, now, on this end of life?
That's beautiful. What a great question. I wrote that piano book in 2012. Well, it was a 10-year. I published in 2012. I started on it 10 years prior. And I'm telling people 10 years later, come study with me because I finally know how to teach that book. So people who have taken it, and what music means to me now is the gift that keeps on giving. I understand how to give it to others in such a way that the book is called Piano Quick because every time I tell you a concept, if you nod your head, I can turn the page. I can just tell you what's on the page. You say, I get it, I turn the page. And we'll turn 12 to 15 pages before we have to stop most times. And you memorize these things precept by precept. I'm giving that book, teaching it in such a way that the people that I teach can turn around and teach it. So it's a tool of evangelism in a way, but it's also one that your understanding increases. When you know the theory behind that book, you can play piano, but you can pick up other instruments and understand. If you tell me the methodology of this trumpet, that second valve is a half step, the first valve is a whole step, I can use those two valves to create different combinations by mathematics and logic. I can learn to play that instrument based on what I learned from Piano Quick.
Wow.
I'm taking my percussion skills from the military and teaching behavior modification. What I want to do with those drumsticks is not teach people how to play the drums, which they'll learn. They'll learn how to read. But what they'll learn, in addition to that, is how to function as a unit, how to rely. I'll intentionally write the percussion pieces so that if somebody's missing, we can't play that piece. So that they learn to rely on each other. Where were you? Are you okay? And change the way we conduct ourselves around one another. With the book, Father to Son, I intend to work with young boys 12 to 14 and put them in 6 to 8 week engagements. At the end, we have a crossing over ceremony, crossing over to manhood. We don't have a bar mitzvah in our culture, so we're going to have a bro mitzvah. And you know, when we talk, so when we talk, when we talk about being on time,
right,
everybody gets a watch. We get a guy, a CEO, to talk about scheduling or conducting yourself, how you dress makes a difference in the world. Everybody gets a new suit. We'll do things that change the culture. So what this means to me now, because I can do it and be in the zone. I can be in flow. I can be at the highest level of worship where I concentrate and nothing else is going on. And I come out of it and go, wow, it's exhilarating. I'm at the place where I can do that. So I want to give others that freedom to flow.
Yeah.
And so if we can remove some of the boundaries in their lives, some of the challenges, so much more of a resource person now. So music it means it's a tool to be a resource to change lives.
Walking in the sunshine. Sunshine of your love. Walking in the sunshine. Walking in the sunshine. Walking in the sunshine.
So who's Eric Willis today?
Boy, I thought I answered the hardest question. That is so hard to say. I'm grateful. I do know who I am. I could tell a story just recently. I was at a church where I decided I'm going to volunteer my time. Yeah. And this particular church, they like the music very loud. I can't hear the people. So I don't know the quality of what we're presenting. So I took it upon myself to take my own personal cable, run it to the PA system, and take what we call a slave, that cable, into a little amplifier so that I could create my own monitor. And the pastor said, "What are you doing?" And I mean, he went there, and I go, "I know you see what I'm doing." So now I'm being not so nice when I say I'm plugging that into this cable, into that thing, and I'm running it to this, and so he goes to berate me. "Well, you should have done that before rehearsal started. You're wasting valuable time." He's saying that he's not being nice. Yeah. And you want to ask, who am I? This is the question. Right. And so when he goes, "It needs to be done professionally," and I'm like, "Do you know I have better equipment at my house than this junk? And if this stuff was installed professionally, I'd have a monitor and wouldn't have to be doing." I mean, the rationale, philosophy is rolling through my mind. Right. So in a split second, I pull that cable, my new adapter from his, and I turn the amp. 5 seconds, this happens. Mm-hmm. And I roll that cable professionally and stick it in my bag, and I say, "Let's go." And he begins to yakety yak a little more. And I say, "Man, I heard you," meaning step away. Right. And when we talked on the phone, I said, I don't want to waste 30 years of my reputation in 5 minutes. So this really doesn't work for me. So I'm going to step down. And he began to talk with a little of the church manipulation. And I say to him, "I know who I am in Christ, and I know how God made me. So I know I need not do this any longer." Yeah. My identity is in Christ because I didn't have one apart from him. Yeah. And no person, you are what you do. I believe that wholeheartedly. Mm-hmm. And when I wasn't doing it, I was nobody. Yeah. But now I can walk in a room. You can tell the difference between those people. That you walk in a room and music is playing, I don't have to play. I don't have to be a part of it. I can enjoy it. And that was a time in my life, I had to identify myself. So I must play so that people know I can play, and then they can know that I am somebody only while I'm doing that. So right. It's a really bad cycle. Right. To be in Christ and have an identity in him above anything else, I think is extraordinary. Plus the things I was doing in life, I wasn't actually qualified to be doing. In man's terminology, mm-hmm. I didn't have a master's degree. What am I doing at Highland Park leading people? And all of the places that I went, everybody was highly skilled and educated. God opened the door for me. So I can say that's my identity.
Thank you so much for coming in and being on Creative Christians and having this conversation with me today. I have so enjoyed being able to talk with you. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing with our audience.
Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate being here.
Jazz, fathers and sons, family, faith. My conversation with Eric Willis has got me reflecting on the value of each of these in my own life. Here's some words of wisdom from Eric Willis on manhood, fathers, sons, and creativity. Manhood. Be a man of valor. Live with a set of values upon which you stand firmly. Have a set of principles that you would defend with your life. Draw boundaries that you are committed to never cross, nor allow others to convince you to compromise. People will learn from the way you live. When they know what you stand for, there will rarely be any confrontation. Fatherhood. Being a father is one of the most important roles you will ever play in your life. Come to fatherhood intentionally. Do not approach this title by accident. One day your son will start a family, and then his son will start a family. Your legacy begins today, and their destiny is dependent upon you. Your family will be a reflection of the wonderful things you did or all that you failed to do. Tenacity. You are unique. The more you realize this, the better you will understand why people do not fully get you or your ideas. Move forward with little need for outside encouragement. People will always understand after you have reached your goal. Go away quietly with the resolve to do what others say cannot be done. Why argue with anyone who does not have the capacity to facilitate innovative thoughts? What would be the point? It is better to show than to tell. Creativity. Creativity is godly. Every time you create, you are emulating your creator. Treat every creative idea as though it is a project that brings chaos into your life. A great deal of your world is in disarray until you bring that project to completion. Write or record all your creative ideas, no matter how zany or far-fetched. Crazy ideas spark usable innovations that generate unbelievable results. Do not be afraid to fail. When you fall on your face, you get up on your knees. By the time you stand again, you will have gained 3 feet just from falling. Failure informs success. Failure teaches valuable lessons. Remember them well. Words of wisdom from Eric Willis's book, Father to Son. Eric Willis is an artist that exemplifies all of the elements of a true creative Christian, living out his creativity and his story as a child of God. Eric Willis knows who he is and who God made him to be. Eric is able to play from that creative well that flows from knowing God made him to express his glory, God's glory, in Eric's artistry, whether it's secular, jazz, worship, or whatever music he is playing. So his faith infuses his music in ways that cannot be put into words. It can only best be experienced and expressed through Eric's playing and, as he said, to have people feel him, not just hear him. His story is part of his music. His faith is part of his music. You can hear it in the way he writes and the way he plays. As you consider how you approach your own craft, your own talent, your own gifts, be it music or another creative field, remember your faith may not always need to be worn on your sleeve. It may be as simple as how you conduct yourself in your day-to-day life, how you treat your sons or daughters, your husband or wife, your family, and others around you, how you live your life and the ways in which you express your creativity. If you're living to give glory to God, you will find new avenues of creative expression that can only come through God's blessing, much like Eric Willis, truly one of the creative Christians. That does it for this episode of Creative Christians. Thank you so much for listening. Go to Apple Podcasts or whatever your favorite podcast distributor is, and be sure to subscribe to catch each and every new episode. I'd appreciate it if after listening you'd take a moment to rate the show. It helps me to gauge feedback and in rankings for the show. If you're really feeling generous, I'd love it if you left a brief review as well. Let me and others know what you like about Creative Christians. You can also email me directly with your feedback, comments, or questions at tim@timristow.com. I'd love to hear from you. I'm Tim Ristow. Until next time, stay creative and stay in God's Word. Blessings. Creative Christians is produced by yours truly, Tim Ristow. Special thanks to my guest today, Eric Willis, and to Pastor Steve Sanford of the Edge Church in Azle. As always, a shout out to my lovely and supportive wife, Tracy Ristow. Creative Christians is an audio production of Tim Ristow Productions. Visit timristow.com to learn more. That's TIMRISTOW.com.